You probably think you already know why Kawasaki's two-stroke MotoGP engine vanished, right? But I was never convinced. So I went digging through old race reports, engineering notes, and interviews with the very people who built and wrote it. And what I uncovered completely changed how I looked at this machine. Was it really just a relic of the past that couldn't handle modern racing? Well, the truth was far more shocking. A long time ago, there were very loud and very fast race bikes, curious, called 500cc two-strokes. These bikes were the fastest bikes of their day. They made a lot of power for their size and were also hard to ride. Kawasaki tried to build one of those big race bikes and called it the Kawasaki KR500. It raced for a few years, made people stare, and then it quietly left the big races. This is the story of this brave bike in a simple way, and I checked the main facts, so the story's true. First, let's meet at the time and place. The KR500 came in the late 1970s and raced in World Big Bike races from 1980 until 1982. That means it was used for 3 seasons in what people called the 500cc Grand Prix class. This was a top level of motorcycle racing. Big names and big factories raced there. Kawasaki wanted to join this fight. They had been very good at smaller bike classes like 250cc and 350cc, and they wanted to win at the big class too. Serious. Kawasaki did not copy other teams. They tried new ideas. One big idea was the engine. The KR500 is a two-stroke. It used 4 cylinders in a layout people call a square 4. The engine size was almost 495 cubic centimeters, just under 500 cubic centimeters. For that time, the engine made a lot of power for its size. Some papers say the engine made about 120 horsepower, shocking. That was strong in the early 1980s for a bike that size. Curiosity loop, but here's the question. If it had so much power, why didn't it win? The KR500 used an aluminum box-style body called a monocoque or semi-monocoque. That means the body and frame are one thin shell that holds the parts inside. The idea was to make the bike very slim so it could cut through the wind better. A slim front helps the bike go faster on long straight roads. Kawasaki had used this kind of thinking to try to make their bike fast on the straights. The company also used special wheels and parts to try to keep the weight low. However, the KR500's strength was its big horsepower, which was also its weakness, as it came in a sudden rush that made the bike unstable in corners. When the bike first went to real races, people smelled oil and heard a sharp 2-stroke scream. The KR500 could run very fast on straight parts of the track. But racetracks have corners too. To win races, you must be fast on straights and quick to turn in corners. The KR500 had trouble turning quickly. It was heavier than some rivals, and the wheelbase was a bit long. These things made it harder to corner like the other bikes from Suzuki, Honda, or Yamaha. Even when the engine was strong, the whole bike had to work as one. The KR500's shape and weight sometimes worked against it in corners. Kawasaki hired good riders to try the KR500. One main rider was Cork Bollington. He was a very good racer who had won world titles in smaller classes before he rode the KR500. Bollington rode the KR500 in the World Series, and he showed the bike could be good sometimes. Excited. He scored some high finishes and even some top 3 results in 1981. But even a great rider cannot always make a heavy bike handle like a lighter bike. Bollington finished the season with some good moments, but not with a title in the 500cc class. Another famous rider who rode KR500 type machines in some races was Eddie Lawson. Lawson later became a top champion in the big class. He tested and rode Kawasaki machines in the US and in some events. He had a rough time with the KR500 too, because it was not easy to keep on the most fast line all the time. Good riders found the KR500 could be strong on the straight lines, but tricky on corners and in tight fights. Kawasaki made the KR500 in small numbers. These were not sunroof bikes for people to buy on the street. They were hand-built race bikes. Kawasaki built only a few and used them in serious races. A lot of times, the bikes were changed between races. Teams tried lighter parts or different forks to make the bike better, but in races, every small thing can change the result. The KR500 stayed a rare and special machine. Today, only a few still exist, and some are in private collections or museums. People who love old race bikes keep them safe sad. Let's talk a little about how a two-stroke makes power. A two-stroke engine makes power every time the piston goes up and down. This can make a quick rush of power. Riders often said two strokes felt like they hit hard when the power came on. That can make a bike tricky to use. The KR500's square-4 engine could give sudden power. If the bike was not in balance, that sudden push could make the bike slip or move. That is why power by itself does not win races. You also need steady control and a frame that helps the rider steer. Engine parts matter too. The KR500 used 4 carburetors and a 6-speed gearbox. It had a dry clutch, like many race bikes. The team worked to make the engine lighter by using magnesium parts in some years. They also tried to make the front suspension work better by adding anti-dive setups. Over the years, Kawasaki made changes to try to fix the trouble spots. In 1981, they changed the engine case to lighter materials and made the chassis stiffer. In 1982, they used different suspension parts. Each change helped a little long pause, dramatic tone, but the bike still could not match the best riders on lighter machines. Curiosity loop. The KR500 came, roared for 3 short years, and then quietly vanished. A bike so bold, why did Kawasaki walk away so soon? The truth says a lot about the brutal world of racing. Racing is a fight of many things at once. You must have power, but you must also have the right shape, the right weight, good tires, and a rider who can make the most of it. The KR500 had power and clever ideas, but it did not have the full package the other teams had already found. Some rivals had lighter frames or better balance. Years of trials and small wins showed Kawasaki how to try new things. But the big prize, the world title, did not come for the KR500. Kawasaki's official pages say the KR500 was a bold try. The company points out the square-4 engine and the aluminum monocoque. Those were bold parts for that time. Kawasaki also notes that the bike became more competitive as it changed from 1980 to 1982. But at the end of 1982, Kawasaki decided to stop racing the KR500 in the World Series. The firm later worked in other racing fields and in other bike ideas. The KR500 was a short chapter, but a loud one. So technically it was never banned, but it lost its charm and faded away in the dark. What did the riders say? Riders who rode the KR500 liked its big power on the long parts of a track. They also feared the bike in slow corners. A rider must be able to point the bike, lean it in, and then get on the gas. If the bike fights the rider, it wastes time. Bollington got some good placings and even podiums in 1981, which showed the bike could be fast when things matched. But across a whole season, other bikes were often better in many places. That is how small things add up in racing. Curious. One interesting part of racing is testing. Teams try things on quiet test days. They measure speeds and balance. Kawasaki did this a lot. They tested the monocoque shape because they wanted to see if a slice-thin front would cut the wind better. They also worked on the engine cases and ways to make the bike lighter. In 1981, they put magnesium parts on the motor to drop weight. Yet even with these tests, there is only so much you can do in a short time. A rival with a lighter base bike can still have an edge. The KR500 had some good moments in races. For example, in 1981, the bike achieved podium finishes. Bollington finished in the top 3 at tracks like the Dutch TT and at the Finnish Grand Prix. That showed the bike had a day when all parts worked well together. In national racing, the KR500 had a bright spot too. In Britain in 1982, Bollington won many races in the ACU 500cc British Championship, showing that on some tracks and in some forms, the bike could win. But winning national races is different than beating every top factory in the World Series. The KR500 had fans and local wins, but not the world crown. Kawasaki's choice to stop after 1982 was not because the bike was bad in every picture. It was because the bike could not beat the best teams enough to justify the big costs. Racing needs money, dramatic with short pause. Engineers and parts need money. When a team does not see the wins it wants, it may choose to stop and try a different way. Kawasaki chose to pause its 500cc world effort after 1982 and move its work into other projects. Now think of the KR500 like a big test. It was a big experiment on the racetrack. Engineers tried the monocoque and the square 4. They learned how the frame shape could make the bike faster in a straight line. They also learned how being hard to work on or heavy can hurt lap times in races with many corners. The KR500 taught lessons. Those lessons help people build better bikes later. So even a bike that did not win the world title can help make future winners. People who love old race bikes still talk about the KR500. It looks different from other bikes of its day. It sounds sharp and thin because a two-stroke engine makes a bright note. The body looks like a long slice because the monocoque tries to make the front small. Fans like to see pictures or videos of the KR500. They like to hear the engine noise and imagine being on the saddle when the bike lets out a loud two-stroke scream. Some museums or private owners keep a 501 safe so new people can look and learn. Let's tell a little story of a race day with a KR500. The team wakes up early. Mechanics bring the bike to the pit. They check carburetors and oil and the chain. The rider hops on and takes the bike out for a warm lap. The engine sings like a small rocket. Later in the race, the KR500 gets flat out on a long straight and tucks in behind the wind. It shows strong speed. But in the twisty part, the bike does not turn as sharply as a lighter rival. A rider must use skill to keep speed through corners. The team watches the times and keeps tuning in for the next race. This is how racing is every week. Small changes, big hopes. One more name to remember is the KR250 and KR350. Kawasaki had won big in these smaller classes with bikes that worked well. The KR500 was built after those wins. Kawasaki tried to move up to the heavier class using ideas that had worked before, but the bigger bike is a different game. Things that work on small bikes do not always work when you make the bike bigger and add power. The KR500 shows this lesson. Winning on small bikes does not always mean instant success in the big class. People sometimes call the KR500 a brave failure. That sounds mean at first, but it is actually a kind of praise. Brave means they tried something new and bold. Failure means they did not win the top prize. But in failing, they learned many things and made the sport move forward. Engineers took those lessons to other machines and to the next years of bike design. A brave try that teaches is not wasted. It is part of how engineers learn to do better next time. So what is the shocking truth? It is simple. Even teams with smart people and big ideas can still lose. You might think new ideas will always win, but racing is a hard puzzle with many pieces. One good part cannot make the whole bike win. The KR500 had a clever engine and a neat frame, but it needed more balance and lighter weight to score the most wins. The team did a lot of work and gave the bike a real chance. The shock is that the best brains and the best tools sometimes do not make a champion. That truth is both sad and honest. So that's a wrap, guys. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like it and also hit the subscribe button if you want Kawasaki to win all their races.